And I know you put a lot of time into compiling this article. Take us through how you arrived at especially the top players.
Yeah, I went through and painstakingly, knowing that on the other end of this list was Twitter. And no matter who I put on there, I'm going to hear about it from fans. But I went through and looked at the bigger names that transferred, that opted out, the incoming true freshmen, the guys that really haven't played yet but were already on the roster. And then I looked at need, where those guys are needed most and how they fit in and how, the impact that they could have. And that was really what I looked at for this list. It was pretty tough because I think now with the transfer portal, in years past, Paul, it's been, if you're using the transfer portal, it's really a crutch or you're doing something wrong. But now if you look at some of the names that have transferred, it's not a crutch anymore. You can absolutely supplement your roster. And there are some big names on this list that I think are going to make an absolute impact this season.
And Tom, I couldn't get over how many players from one school in particular ended up on your list. Most of them at Oklahoma, one of course at Alabama, and that's the University of Tennessee, a school that didn't need to lose anyone and lost an enormous amount of talent.
Yeah, it's devastating for a new coaching staff to come in and have that many players leave your roster, but that many really good players, key contributors on both offense and defense. It's devastating, but you look at the impact that those guys can make. I think Tennessee, those players that left, Wanya Morris, the left tackle, Eric Gray, the running back, both now at Oklahoma, Key Lawrence at Oklahoma as well. I think those guys fit in exactly what I just mentioned with those players that are transferring that can come into any situation and make an impact. And really, I think the biggest name, we're probably going to talk about him in a second, Henry To'oTo'o, the linebacker who transferred out to Alabama. I've got him #1 on the list because I covered him out of recruiting in high school, and I know the impact that he could make within this offense, and I had to put him at #1 because I think he's going to fit in really well at Alabama.
And let's talk about some of the other ones. Second is you had Gilbert. I think we know a lot about him. He's had an interesting path, but what do we expect from him at UGA? And certainly, you know, he was at LSU. He nearly went to Florida. Give us the story on Gilbert.
Well, I think out of high school, again, another guy that I covered in high school is recruitment. He was, by every outlet out there, was a 5-star, a guy who really transcended the tight end position. He was more of a wide receiver, and I think that's where Georgia lists him now as a wide receiver, but he's 6'5". He's a big target out there. He can run, he can catch, he can do a little bit of everything. And I think now what sticks out for me is that he doesn't have to be the guy at Georgia. He doesn't have to be the main attraction, or there's no pressure on him to carry the load on offense. Now you've got JT Daniels, maybe a little bit more comfortable at quarterback. You've got Kearis Jackson. You've got Jermaine Burton. You have a 6'7" tight end in Darnell Washington. If George Pickens can get healthy as well, you can put Eric Gilbert into that lineup, and you can make it very difficult for defenses. If I'm Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator at Georgia, I'm probably laughing myself to sleep every night thinking about the combinations through the air that I'll have on offense, because I think Gilbert, he's versatile. He can give you a deep threat. He can really provide some mismatches with the other receivers that they have, and I think he's going to fit in really well. And now the receiving core at Georgia went from a question mark to, if these guys perform the way they should, I think it's going to be a strength. And I agree with what you said before. Georgia, a team that I definitely think to watch out for this season.
Tom, Bryce Young has had so much attention, but we really still haven't seen him play very much. I know those who saw him in high school, including you, have come away with very favorable impressions. What should we look for with Alabama's starting quarterback?
You know, a lot of times in recruiting, I look for some of the stuff that doesn't show up on the scouting report, the intangibles, the stuff off the field, and especially with quarterbacks. I think if you go and look at quarterbacks, I think you can find a correlation between personality and between really doesn't show up in their stats, and it really, are they a leader? Can they handle pressure? What types of situations have they been in before? And I've actually talked to Lane Kiffin about this, that he likes to hang out with quarterbacks when they come and visit, just to see if they're what kind of guy they are, if they're someone that he would want to hang out with. And covering Bryce Young, he had a really, really interesting high school career where he led one of the top high schools in California. He had a lot of battles with DJ Uiagalelei, now at Clemson. And I actually talked to Bryce after a loss to DJ's team in the playoffs. And I had to schedule the call one day and then reschedule it because he was so upset and could not let go of that loss that he couldn't talk on the phone and had to reschedule it. So Alabama's getting a competitor, a guy who can handle the pressure. There's no red flags, a hard worker, and then you combine that with the talent that he has on the field. I think he's obviously going to be a little bit more Tua than he is Mac Jones. He's going to bring just playmaking ability to this offense, and he can definitely throw the ball. It's not a guy who just runs. He can pass, and we saw a little bit of that in the spring game this past spring.
When you're trying to evaluate so many different players, in this case 50, I know there are just very fine lines. And clearly you are doing this not, I don't want to call it for entertainment purposes. You're trying to, it's informative. But how do you differentiate between 1 and 2, 2 and 3? Because I'm sure that there are so many different aspects of these guys that quite a few of them could be at number 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think really for me it was the top 3 that really stood out, and I guess maybe you could even put it out to the top 5. The Oklahoma running backs I have on there. I mentioned Eric Gray. I tried to look really at the impact that a lot of these guys are gonna make, and those top 5 I think are probably solidified for me. I think those guys are really gonna make a big impact.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.